Going on, everybody? John Matrix here. Hope you all are having yourselves a wonderful day wherever you're at, and whenever you are watching this. We're gonna be jumping into the 40K universe here today. We're picking up where we left off with doing the Primarch lore videos. We're gonna be checking out Magnus the Red, the Price of Knowledge by the Amber King. Links will be down below in the description as always to the original video without my commentary and reaction, and to the Amber King's channel. Please do me a favor, if you enjoy good detailed 40K lore videos, especially on specific characters, the Amber King's videos are very well done. We've done the reactions to several of his videos in the past. I believe we've done Jagatai Khan. We did a video on Sevatar, Conrad Kurz, and Alfarius. I think those are the videos of his that we've done reactions on so far, maybe a couple of others. Very good videos. I love his Primarch lore videos, so looking forward to getting into Magnus here today. But yes, please go to his channel, check out his content. If you enjoy it, be sure to like the videos that you've enjoyed, hit that sub button, check out his Patreon, and check out any kind of YouTube membership stuff that he's got for ways to give him some extra love and support. This is going to be a long video. His video is about 3.5 hours long, so we're getting into Lord of the Rings extended edition territory here. So because of that, we're probably going to break this video up into 2 or 3 parts, and I'll upload them separately. And then for you crazy people out there that want to just throw something on and listen to it in the background while you're working, or just want to listen to it all the way through, I will upload it as one long video. Again, this is a 3.5 hour video, so with my commentary and reaction and pausing and stuff like that, this could end up being upwards of 5+ hours long. So we'll see where we go. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, so more than likely this will be uploaded into 2 or 3 parts, and then again I'll upload it as one long massive video for the people that would rather just have it as one long massive video. But with all that said, looking forward to getting into this, looking forward to getting back into the Primarch videos here with the Amber King. I think after we do Magnus here, we're probably going to look at doing Leman Russ next, and then we'll figure out where we want to go from there as far as videos go. So yeah, strap in. We're going to get into it here, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Again, this is Magnus the Red, the Price of Knowledge by the Amber King. Let's do it.
Necessity justifies all, and this is necessary. Without this primeval force, without this chaos, there will be stagnation. Ignorance instead of illumination. Existence instead of life.
That's already an interesting statement, right? The idea that without chaos, life is stagnant and almost meaningless. That's kind of an interesting take on it.
Humanity needs to be led upwards with small steps, with their eyes gradually opened, lest the light blind them.
There it is. Check out his Patreon. Please give the man some support. Give him some love. He definitely deserves it. Prospero.
The only good is knowledge, and the only evil is ignorance. If I am guilty of anything, it is the simple pursuit of knowledge. I am its master. I swear it.
See, that's why I would fall to Tzeentch. I've said this a million times. If the Chaos Gods were real, Tzeentch would end up taking hold of me because of that simple fact. Because I have a thirst for knowledge. I want to know and learn and understand things. So I would easily fall to Tzeentch.
I am guilty of anything. It is the pursuit of knowledge. I am its master. I swear it. Because there is no sin but ignorance. The sorcerer of Prospero, the Cyclopean giant, the Crimson King, Primarch of the 15th, the Thousand Sons Legion, Magnus the Red. A name uttered with venom and hate to an Imperium that only knows the monster that schemes and burns everything in his path. A man that desired enlightenment for all of humanity, but who now fights against his own species in the cabal of the gods of chaos. But who was the man that became the monster? How did someone, once so loyal to the Emperor, turn his back upon his father and his species? His story begins in the 30th millennium. Terror, the golden age of humanity, had passed. We stand in the ashes of the age of strife, the collapse of the federation of mankind across the stars. Decay and ruin touches all of the worlds,
Another pause here. I think that would also be a fascinating, series for someone to make a show out of. That, like, Star Trek utopian kind of time period before the dark age of technology happened, like, leading up to that would be a very interesting kind of series to do. I would like to see, no one really knows about it. It's all myth, lore, and kind of legend. We just know that humanity was, basically had taken over the stars for, I guess lack of a better term. AI had really helped them push the boundaries of what they were able to accomplish, and basically they were able to just be free to go and explore while AI took care of, everyday necessities. And then also because the AI technology, expanded exponentially, and it was to the point where even the Eldari and the Orcs had peace treaties and non-aggression pacts with humanity because we were so technologically advanced and powerful. So, like, I don't know. To me, it would just be an interesting, in Warhammer 40K universe series to kind of explore that time period to see what humanity was like, and then what led to humanity's downfall with the dark age of technology when that happened, when it seems like chaos eventually corrupted AI and sparked a war between humanity and AI. That would be pretty interesting.
Long humanity resides upon, isolated and bleeding knowledge and wealth, prey to civil strife and xenos. But upon Terra, the birthplace of our species, hope rises. The Imperium of mankind, deep below the surface of the cradle of mankind, a consciousness awoke. It was new, ignorant, and vulnerable. He felt a voice connect to his mind, as if another being resided in his thoughts. Master, Creator, Father, the Emperor of mankind. A presence, an aura, so earth-shattering, powerful, ancient, cold, but yet caring. Humanity distilled. He was a child. He was human, created inside a gestation capsule by this being, his father. He was speaking to him through telepathic communication, and this child began to learn, evolving his consciousness more each time he conversed with this emperor. But all of this was ripped away from him. The chambers around his capsule began to shake and convulse. Energies poured in from the realm of sentient madness, the mirror dimension, the warp. The capsule was ripped from the ground with violence and hate. Claws scraped and bit into the protective tomb. He was hurled through the warp, taken away from the side of his father. This capsule was spit out back into real space, falling down in fire towards a planet in the Frozari system, Prospero. The child opened his eyes for the first time. He took his first breath, spluttering abiotic fluid from his lungs. A visage of twilight met his eyes. Dark stone and muted light stretched for miles as the heat of the wreckage that was his gestation capsule illuminated his place on top of a mountain. a beacon to the others that resided upon this world. The child began to wonder, his mind filled with confusion and disorientation. Why was he here? How was he here? Where was the man who had spoken into his mind? For days, weeks, the child strode, almost overwhelmed by the volume of information. The vibrant world around him screamed. He was not alone on this world. Finally, he saw them, humans. The child stood before a city of beautiful white marble, pyramids and towers touching the very heavens. The child felt a power here, by a means he did not understand. The human citizens of Tizca found this wandering child. His presence made them want to kneel. Their pulses quickened. Hope, power, and obedience swelled within as they laid eyes upon him. Vibrant crimson skin and hair, and he was swelled with psychic power. He was perfect. This child was taken in, but they did not grant him any title nor name, for he already knew his name, the one his creator had given him, a name that had been created from that commanding voice from before, his last piece of home, Magnus.
Wouldn't it be a little strange though, you know, like seeing the special kid, the special person? I would assume even as a child, right, his skin was red, or did his skin turn red after he started messing with the warp, you know? I would assume that he had red skin, I think, throughout. So like, wouldn't they be like, a little weird?
A man who had been haunted by prescient dreams of doom found the night where a comet of fire had roared down, that those dreams had vanished. A leader of the people of Tizca, an adept of the studies of the warp, Amon. Amon saw this child. He saw how special he was, and he took him in. He became his teacher, a father, and a friend. The boy astounded him. He absorbed information to a speed and understanding he had never seen before. Within a year, this young Magnus had devoured and comprehended everything Amon could teach him. The history of this world, how millennia before, in an age of darkness that nearly destroyed the people of Tizca, the foul Xenos, the Psychnuin, a chitinous warp-spawned creature that had infested the entire world. It brought ruin and death to the people of Prospero, utilizing its disgusting powers of the warp to lay their young inside their victim's mind. A hatching, unleashing madness,
40K mind flayers, okay, like that sounds terrifying.
pain and death. But the people had survived. For those born with psychic abilities, even back then, with their primitive knowledge, learned to harness their power, shielding their minds. It was these survivors that had built the foundations of Tizca, the now home of Magnus. This cornucopia of knowledge and psychic exploration was devoured by the boy from the heavens. These powers had saved the people of Prospero. It was a gift. It was power. It was strength. It was survival. There was never enough of it. More and more, Magnus began to explore, soaking it up with the wonder and vitality only a child could feel. Seeing the impossible be achieved, it was incredible. Venturing outside the marble walls of his home, Magnus began to explore the ruins of this world. Although numerous times he was warned of the danger, even the danger of exploring his powers too much, he was just too curious. He just had to explore. Besides,
I mean, not gonna lie, I would be too, dude. Like, I mean, like I said, I'm the type of person that would want to try to like find what my upper limits are and my extremes and how to push past them. And you know, if I was able to utilize the warp as a psyker, like I would, like I said, I would fall to either Zinch or probably end up getting possessed by a demon. Like, because it would end up happening. Like, I'm not gonna lie.
Right, he was Magnus. He was special. He would be fine. Gazing to the cliffs above him, he saw an avian statue of old. It tumbled down to the ground and shattered. An almost insignificant moment in time, until he peered at the broken shards, and then he saw it. The pattern, the precise geometrical shapes. He delved further and deeper with a lens beyond human. The energies of the warp flowing through him. It made him want to weep. The beauty, the logic and structure. It's like a
100%.
fingerprint of
Without
a
a question.
creator, a primordial.
Yeah, 100%. Like the rubric of Aramic stuff. Like, yeah, that'd be me doing all that.
Creator. Magnus felt a deep understanding of the world. It washed over him. He bade Amon and the other Psyker scholars to witness this truth. One by one, their skepticism was taken away, replaced by utter silence, as they began to see it too. How blind had they been? But the moment was shattered. The Psychnuian came eerily floating towards them. They had been ambushed. The still young Magnus, Amon, and 50 scholars were surrounded, set upon by these warp creatures that began to rip and shred the humans to pieces, all the while attacking their psychic mental barriers. Only Magnus, Amon, and 8 others remained. On the verge of being swarmed, Magnus felt a change within him. Dormant power unlocked, surging forth with a primordial understanding he had just witnessed. Torrents of roaring hot fire was unleashed from his hands. Power, like a flood of life, coursed through him.
I just see Magnus doing the Emperor pose here with fire instead of lightning. Unlimited power!
All the way to his fingertips. It felt electric, incredible even. His fellow survivors too unleashed their new understanding into deadly psychic abilities. They boiled the Xenos alive. They read their thoughts and attack patterns. They threw objects with their minds and pulsed protective barriers. With a mountain of Psychnuian viscera under their feet, Magnus, Amon, and the Tizcan scholars had survived. Each mortal man giving birth to a pillar of new prospering cults. The Athenaeans, Corvade, Pavoni, Pyre, and Raptora.
Interesting.
Alone, at the top, the master of all the disciplines stood, the young man who had come from the heavens, a Magus, master of all cults, Magnus the Red. The child, the student, the young man, and now the master, the teacher. Having peered deeper, having understood the fabric of the universe to a level beyond his fellow humans, Magnus became the guide. He became the leader of Tizca, ready to helm and bring this wonderful knowledge to his people, to bring them out of the dark where he had once been, to the truth of enlightenment, because he loved them. The only good is knowledge, and the only evil is ignorance. If I am guilty of anything, it is the simple pursuit of knowledge. I am its master. I swear it. A core philosophy formed from everything Prospero had taught him. Ignorance had left them vulnerable to Xenos. Knowledge had saved them. Ignorance was the sin that had cost lives. He would do everything in his power to avert the sin. He would learn everything he could, a repository of knowledge so great no threat would ever harm him or his people. He would be its master. He swore to it. Decades of learning, studying, and teaching. Magnus was proud to call this world home, but it was not his true home. He knew in his heart. Once again he heard the voice, the one from his earliest memories. his master, his creator, his father had found him. The Emperor of mankind. It was like standing next to a star, blinding, warming, awe-inspiring. From humanity's home world of terror, an empire had been birthed, expanding outwards across the galaxy. And our
I wonder what really that must be like, like being a Primarch and growing up around essentially normal humans. I guess for Magnus it might be slightly a little bit different because you grew up around people with abilities, like psychers and stuff have. But being a Primarch and essentially just being on another level, like far beyond what humans really are. And, potentially shepherding them, helping them, whatever, in some cases. And then meeting the Emperor, who is even then above you, right? Like you've lived your whole life essentially being at like what you might think is the pinnacle of whatever abilities there might be, etc. And then you see the Emperor and you see there's something even far beyond you. Like I wonder really like what that feeling might be like, And I guess it would be different for each one. Like obviously Angron, with what happened to him and being forced to essentially abandon everyone that he grew up and loved to death, that would be a terrible experience. And obviously it's a good reason why I hated the Emperor. But I don't know. It's just that idea of like growing up your entire life, essentially being the best at everything, being able to do things that no one else is capable of doing, being surrounded by normal humans, and then you see something that, is beyond even what you are capable of or might be able to even understand, like what would that do to you? And like, I would think for someone like Magnus, that would make him want to learn and push himself even further, want to understand more. Because like, that's one of the things that I feel like I could relate with Magnus is like I've said, I very much have like a want to like really understand and learn things. So I feel like, yeah, if I were in his position, it would make me want to really learn from the Emperor more, hone my psychic abilities more, see what, kind of potential there even is out there that's even beyond mine. Essentially having something else to look up to and see where the potential of things could go. You know what I mean? I don't know if I'm necessarily really explaining what I'm trying to say very well, but anyway.
After decades, this Imperium finally reached the Prospero system. The child of Prospero never forgot where he came from. He never really lost contact with his father, communicating psychically over the decades as he lived inside Tizca. But this connection was nothing compared to the earth-shattering presence Magnus felt as his eyes dawned upon the master of mankind. Those golden eyes, what had they seen over untold millennia? What knowledge did he hold? What could he teach him? Magnus fell to his knees.
That's what I was saying. Like, what could he teach him? What more could he learn? What things are out there that he has no idea that are capable? Like a whole new universe of things could have just opened up for Magnus, just being introduced to the Emperor and seeing who he is and the kind of potential that he has. Hey, what's up, Howard? What's going on, brother?
In submission to his father, pledging his loyalty to the Emperor and the Imperium of mankind. With childlike wonder, Magnus showed the Emperor Prospero and its crown jewel of Tizca, the city of light, where the people lived in prosperity and happiness.
Hence Prospero.
Even the children laughed and played on the streets, utilizing their psychic gifts. Servers would read your mind, bring you what you truly desired before you had even said it. Enormous white marble pyramids housed the thousands of scholars and researchers, dedicating their lives to the explorations of the mysteries of the universe. Magnus was proud. Terra may have been his home, but Prospero had made him, and in return he had made them into a civilization of envy. However, this moment of joy dissipated as the Emperor presented to Magnus the Thousand Sons Legion, the Adeptus Astartes, superhuman warriors created from the meshing of stimulants and specialized organs grown from Magnus's own DNA. So
Yeah, that would be weird too, right? I hadn't really thought about that before, but like imagine you've been like disconnected from the Emperor and the Imperium, and you've grown up on some remote planet with, you know, humanity, and you've gone through your whole life doing whatever it is that you're doing, and then all of a sudden the Emperor shows up and he's like, hey, by the way, you see all these dudes behind me, these genetically modified warriors? I took your DNA and basically spliced it with them. They're basically like your sons, by the way, that you never knew you had. So, yeah, welcome to the responsibility of leading them and teaching them. And now you're going to go out into the universe and you're going to fight and conquer in my name. Thanks. You know, goodbye. I mean, it's like, that's a big, that really would be like a huge responsibility. And it's like, I'm sure a lot of them wouldn't even be necessarily really prepared for it. It makes me wonder, out of all of them, because of Magnus's psychic abilities, you know, it hasn't been mentioned here in this video, but maybe Magnus, through some of his abilities, I would assume, might be able to have, like, you know, dreams of the future or visions of the future, where maybe he could have seen glimpses of these things that made a, you know, maybe that would have prepared him more or something, you know? I feel like Magnus, out of all of them, might have been potentially the most prepared for a situation like this. But it's like, yeah, you know, he grew up on this planet. Other than those warp bugs, it seems like he grew up on a relatively peaceful planet that's dedicated to just learning and research. And that's all he's really done his whole life, has just been a scholar, wanting to uncover the secrets of the universe. And now he has this legion of these genetically modified superhuman soldiers that he has to lead to go out and conquer the universe, you know?
sons to Magnus, just as he was a son of the Emperor. Faster, stronger, and more durable than the mortal man. A legion of warriors created for the greatest war in humanity's history, the Great Crusade. The reunification of the lost colonies of mankind across the stars. The age of strife was over, and once again humanity would be united under one banner, one singular vision at its heart, the Imperium and the Emperor of mankind. But something was wrong. What should have been thousands of warriors barely numbered 1,000 men. Before Magnus, the last living members of his legion stood, holding a dark curse within, the flesh change. For decades, the sons of Magnus, recruited from the people of Terra, had fought with distinction and glory, conquering Terra and venturing to the stars with the launch of the Great Crusade. But after decades of war, the Legion saw the first signs of a poison underneath. Legionaries began to feel ill. Pain, needle sharp, spiked from every cell in their body. Their form would start to convulse and grow. Cancers and swelling consumed them in the tombs of their armor. Every part of them wanting to burst forth with unbridled change.
You know, you think the Emperor would see this and be like, maybe I should go back to the genetic drawing board here and try to start over, maybe correct some of these issues. I don't know.
Leaving the victim a mewling, groaning mess, only fit for the mercy of a quick death. They began to drop like flies, whistling down to the survivors that—
'Cause I mean, right, like, he already saw some of the degradation that happened with the Thunder Warriors, and we know what he had to do to deal with them because of their issues. So, I mean, if he's already seen it, I mean, again, it could just be a situation where it's like, he's at a time they've got to go out and do this. So he just can't, he just has to let it happen. Right. And at least the Astartes aren't quite as powerful or potent as the Thunder Warriors were, so they might not be as big of a threat. And he's got other Astartes legions that are more stable that could deal with them if the time came where they needed to be dealt with, you know? So I guess it could just be a situation where it's like, I have to let this go so I can deal with more important things like the webway stuff. But yeah, I don't know.
Earned their namesake. Less than 1,000 Astartes, the 1,000 Suns. Magnus stood before them, their enormous Primarch, with crimson skin, and felt nothing but shame. Magnus immediately began his work, delving into every scripture, every tome, and scrap of knowledge the Imperium and the vaults of Tisca had to offer. He was going to save them. Perhaps he felt it was his fault. The curse was in their blood. His blood. Perhaps it was his flaw. The very thought filling him with dread. But if his life on Prospero had taught him one thing, knowledge was...
That is also interesting too, right? Now it's like all of a sudden you've been thrust with this burden of, you know, these are humans that have been made in your image and they're flawed. So maybe there's a flaw in you that you need to correct. And so now you have this burden of dealing with that, you know? Is there, like, even just like self-reflection is like, is there a problem with me that's causing this? You know? And what needs to be done to correct that? Is there something that's wrong inherently in my blood, in my DNA that has cursed them? Is there a curse with me? You know, like that would also then be a whole other, you know, side of mental baggage that the Emperor just dumped on you that you got to deal with now.
Save them. He separated his soul from his body, swimming the tides of the great ocean like a blazing comet, delving into every corner and crevice of that sentient realm for any scrap of knowledge he could use. With time ticking down for his sons, he returned to them. Many locked away in stasis, such as Azek Ahriman, awoke to find a legion restored. His body was stable. The unbridled pain and change was gone. He looked up to find his lord, one eye missing, sacrificed for the knowledge to save his sons. The legion was elated. Their father had saved them, but some were not saved, such as Osmund Ahriman, twin of Azek, and the psychological trauma would never fade. But once again the 15th Legion could serve the Imperium. Knowledge had saved his sons. Magnus once again vindicated, and reaffirmed by the use and exploration of the primordial creator, the power of the warp.
And there's always a price to pay for it, though.
With his legion saved, the Primarch accompanied his father back to Terra as the legion began rebuilding, drawing new recruits from the world of Prospero itself, many itching for the opportunity to serve their lord. Once again, Magnus was upon the place of his birth, Terra, the bustling metropolis, now the heart of a galaxy-spanning empire. The Emperor took Magnus under his wing, gifting him knowledge and teaching him things beyond even his imagination. For the first time in his life, Magnus was no longer the smartest or most powerful in the room. In the great towers of the Imperial Palace, Magnus and the Emperor spent many nights in discussion and debate. They untethered their souls, father and son, even flying the great ocean and the warp together. He even spent time under tutelage of Malkador, the Emperor's own right hand. Upon Terra, Magnus was...
That must be like a great feeling too for Magnus, right? Like going to Terra and then finding other people that have more knowledge and capabilities than you that you can actually learn from again. Like that must be a great and excited feeling to be able to like learn more and explore new things in new ways and have someone who can join you on your journeys of, you know, going through the warp.
At the heart of the Imperium, a Primarch to a legion, battling in the Great Crusade. But he was not alone. There were others upon this world that matched his stature and power. Other Primarchs, his brothers. Titans, superhumans far beyond the mortal and even Astartes. Scattered like him across the galaxy and slowly reunited with their father as the boundaries of the Great Crusade had expanded. 20 brothers, each of them raised on different worlds, taught by different masters, and schooled in different creeds. Magnus heard their tales, the meeting between their fathers and sons, now becoming myth and rumor amongst a growing Imperium. But Magnus found that he alone could recall the time on Terra before their scattering. He enjoyed the fact that he was not alone in the universe, and more were being found. Upon his time on Terra, he met many of his brothers, finding kinship with some, such as Perturabo of the Iron Warriors Legion, bonding over their love of history and scholarship, delving into ruins upon Terra in search of lost texts. Others he respected, such as Sanguinius, Ferrus Manus, and Vulcan. And there were some
We got Frostmourne here. One of the Primarchs has Frostmourne. What's happening?
who immediately took a disliking to the Lord of Prospero, Leman Russ of the Space Wolves, seeing the robed, armored scholar and his use of psychic powers as cowardly. The time for Magnus on Terra and the years he spent there finally dawned. A deep sorrow came over him, as he had no wish to be again separated from his father. One last time, they sailed the great ocean, soaring above Terra in the clouds, knowing that it would be decades until they would meet again. The Great Crusade. Humanity demanded Magnus's attention. He had learned so much. He felt a sting of pity from his father, to be burdened with so much knowledge. But this would be Magnus's task, the enlightenment of the Imperium, dragging out those corners of humanity left in the dark, blind, ignorant. But before Magnus departed, the Emperor told his son to be cautious of the warp, cautious of the idea that he could do no wrong, that with all the knowledge and power he possessed, he was not faultless. He was.
Well, I think he's already, like, maybe I'm wrong here, but I think him finding the cure, quote unquote cure, by sacrificing his eye, he had already met Tzeentch at that point, right? Am I mistaken? Wasn't that what he did? Didn't he essentially, like, already communicate to Tzeentch and sacrifice his eye for the knowledge to cure his legion? Maybe I'm incorrect. If I am, let me know. But I thought that's what essentially happened. So he's already, if that is the case, technically corrupted, I guess. I don't know.
Was human. Always question. Always be open to different ways of thinking. That his immortality was achieved through his legacy, his sons. The Lord of Prospero, on his long journey, finally returned to Tizca. Assembled before a legion of his sons, they together began the painstaking work of rebuilding and remolding the 15th Legion. With Terran and Prosperine united, the disciplines of the various Prosperine cults were shared with Magnus's psychically gifted sons. Gone was the old livery, new, vibrant crimson donned the 15th Legion's armor, in honor of their lord and savior, a Crimson Legion for a Crimson King, finally rebuilt over decades, with their ranks swelled, warriors educated by Magnus himself. The 1,000 Sons left Prospero and rejoined the Great Crusade.
Here we go. Start of the Great Crusade.
The curse of assumed knowledge is a challenge all enlightened individuals face. We must remember that we once walked in their shoes and were blind to the truths of the universe. The wider our views of the universe becomes, the more our beliefs must come to us second-hand. Our reliance on higher authorities forms almost every aspect of our worldview.
I am well aware of that, Atharva. Sadly, not everyone will survive to reach orbit in safety. We've already seen civil disobedience, riots, and people who simply don't want to leave.
There's no way anyone can organize the mass evacuation of an entire planet without loss of life. Why would anyone not want to leave a doomed world?
Hathor Mart and others have reported instances of the populace refusing to relocate in the face of certain death. But I agree. It is vexing why arguments of sound logic and reason should be ignored.
The Imperium is better off without such fools,
said Phosis Dakar.
Why should we waste time and energy trying to help those who will not help themselves?
Perturabo leaned over the plotting table, and Phosis Dakar recoiled from the flint in his gaze. When the Primarch spoke, it was with measured tones of a disappointed teacher.
For the same reason I would not allow a child to pick flowers on the edge of a cliff, no matter how bright the blooms. For the same reason I would not let you wander the minefields before this fortress without a 4th Legion map and the training to interpret it. We must put aside such childish ignorance and do what is right. Now, do you understand why we must help as many of Morningstar's people as we can?
Yes, Lord Perturabo. I am in your debt for correcting my erroneous thinking.
Phosis Dakar was a seasoned scholar, but rarely did he ever admit to being in need of instruction. Even now, in the face of a Primarch's rebuke, his aura betrayed a measure of insolence. Magnus grinned and said,
Phosis Dakar is at his best when dealing with absolutes. True and false, right and wrong.
Only Siths deal in absolutes anyway.
He excels at unlocking the structures of empirical formulae, but he will never be a moral philosopher or grand debater.
Perhaps not, and he's not the first to
He's no master debater.
express such sentiments. But I'll not have it said we left innocents to die when we could have done something to save them. You and I need to work together, brother. I need every one of your warriors tasked to this world's evacuation, not chasing relics and digging in the dust.
One squad diverted to the preservation of knowledge will not affect your timetable. The secrets this world might hold are too precious to be so easily squandered.
You really believe there is some ancient knowledge buried in Zarukan that will explain why Morningstar survived Old Night unscathed?
I am certain of it.
If anyone else, I would say such certainty was arrogant.
sighed Perturabo, letting the data on the plotter table disperse like smoke.
When have I ever been wrong about such things?
Never,
admitted Perturabo, stepping towards the sheet-covered workbenches at the perimeter of the mezzanine.
But there is a first time for everything, and I
Not
need
wrong.
all your warriors on board. But here I want to show you something.
The Primarch pulled back a white sheet to reveal the haphazard arrangement of half-finished projects, contraptions of mysterious purpose, and beautiful arrangements of gears and motors.
This is my workshop.
It is just as I expected.
Said Magnus, delightedly moving from bench to bench to examine the pieces lying around the edges of the workshop. He lifted a sheet of wax paper, laid beside a partially completed model of a grand amphitheatre.
The Thaliacron. You've begun work on it?
Not yet. Soon, when the crusade is done and we have heroic tales aplenty to fill it with song, then I'll build it.
Oh, sweet summer child, when the crusade is done. Sweet, sweet summer child.
On the mountain across from Father's palace.
I will be there to see it unveiled.
Promised Magnus, and his enthusiasm for his brother's work was genuine and contagious. He and Perturabo spoke as brothers, who had shared every memory from birth to this moment, yet they had known each other only a few short years. Magnus had once spoken of how he and Perturabo had spent time together on Terra, recovering the relics of a long-dead polymath, and unearthing arcana from the forgotten places of old Earth. Arthur had thrilled to hear such tales, relishing every opportunity to learn more of his gene sire. The obvious love between these godlike warriors filled the workspace with a swelling feeling of confraternity, a bond of brotherhood that could never be broken.
This will be of interest to you, brother,
said Perturabo, holding out a complex arrangement of curved metal, winding mechanisms and adjustable lenses.
I made a replica of the Antikythera just like you asked.
To see so delicate a mechanism in Perturabo's
Interesting.
hand seemed incongruous, as most apparatus bearing the stamp of the Iron Warriors that Arvida had seen, save for those within this chamber, had been brutally functional.
Does it work?
I am not entirely sure. You never fully explained its intended purpose or how exactly it was designed to function.
You've built it. What do you think it does?
I believe it to be some form of navigational instrument.
Said Perturabo, lifting the device to look through one of its eyepieces.
It has the look of a sextant once used by seafarers, but with infinitely more dimensions to its operation. What manner of ocean would you be navigating to require such a device?
The Great Ocean. It allows even those without our gifts to perceive the realm beyond.
Perturabo nodded and set down the Antikythera.
I suspected as much.
He said with a sigh, turning to lift something heavy from another part of his workbench.
You remember what our father told us in the Hall of Leng, when he spoke of the warp and the danger of looking too deeply into its heart?
I do. But this has nothing to do with that.
It has everything to do with that, as well you know. But we will speak of this later.
Perturabo's arm swung around, and he smashed the delicate mechanisms of the Antikythera with a heavy hammer. The metal of the device buckled and split, the precision ground lenses shattering into 1,000
That's kind of interesting how they took the Antikythera device and in the context of Warhammer said, you know, basically that this was created by humans to allow them to navigate, but also use elements of the warp so that even, you know, in ancient, for them would be like ancient Earth, you know, like humanity was still was already, you know, toying with the warp and having the influence of chaos in them. That's kind of fascinating. Also kind of sucks that he breaks it here, but I mean, it is what it is.
fragments.
Brother, no!
Cried Magnus, as the pieces fell to the floor.
Why?
Perturabo replaced the hammer on his workbench and said,
Because I will play no part in aiding you in delving into things you have been told to leave well alone. Our father knows more than us. He has seen further than us. If he tells us there are regions of the warp into which even he does not dare look, then we are beholden to accept that.
Magnus
See? Smart. Those are smart words, dude. If even the Emperor, who is, you know, potentially unfathomably beyond you, is not willing to go and do certain things, that should give you pause as to not do those certain things. But, you know, every kid goes through a rebellious phase, you know, so I guess maybe that was just Magnus's rebellious phase.
stared at the ruined device in disbelief. Such a piece was the work of a master, a treasure that ought to have been held up as the epitome of the craftsman's art. Arthur saw Magnus's aura darken like blood in water.
Knowing what you suspected, you could have destroyed the Antikythera at any time after its completion.
Said Magnus, with cold and controlled anger.
But you waited until I was here to see you do it. Why?
Because
Prove a
you
point.
needed to see it destroyed to truly understand.
Magnus let out a breath.
You have a cruel streak in you, brother.
Perhaps. But sometimes cruelty is the only way to make a point so clearly that nobody can ever mistake its intent.
Not wrong.
The Great Crusade. Millions of Astartes.
That was a very fascinating interaction between the two of them. It definitely seems like they're very close, but Perturabo seems like he's got, I guess, the right idea of things. He's trying to keep Magnus from straying too far off the path of enlightenment, I guess. I don't know if that's like the proper way to say it, but trying to keep him from, taking things too far and diving too deep, into things that he shouldn't.
These billions of mortal men and women, accompanied by contingents from the Mechanicum of Mars, had bled out across the galaxy for over a century. What began on Terra was now an empire that encompassed billions upon billions of humans across the stars, painstakingly rebuilt under the tutelage of Magnus. The Thousand Sons Legion enacted imperial compliance across the galaxy, horrifying Xenos, and non-compliant colonies of mankind fell under their iron fist. Men and women were turned to see enormous men, armored in vibrant crimson, wielding incredible power. Athenians, Corvate, Pavoni, Pyre, and Raptora. Enemy battle plans were read from their minds, or divined before they had even made them. Marines wielded fire and lightning in their hands. Whole contingents were telekinetically maneuvered across the battlefield, led by the Crimson Primarch, who seemed to remake matter with a thought. It was an army of thousands, worth the strength of millions, a statement to the Prosperine cults and teachings of Magnus. But war was not the only thing wielded in the hands of the Thousand Sons Legion. Wherever they strode, no matter who they brought into imperial compliance, with peace or war, it was knowledge, the 15th sword. Hidden tomes, lost libraries, human and Xenos alike, all knowledge that could be claimed from across the universe was collected, saved by Magnus and his sons. The only good is knowledge, and the only evil is ignorance. And how could Magnus destroy knowledge? Knowledge had delivered him from ignorance into enlightenment. The curse of assumed knowledge, the challenge that all enlightened individuals must face. We must remember that we once walked in their shoes, and were blind to the truths of the universe. Knowledge had saved him, and his people from the Psychonuan. It had saved his legion. It was the key to a future, a golden age for humanity, where all of mankind had mastery over the power of the primordial creator, the warp. Most of the galaxy was blind to his truths, and Magnus pitied them. Like precious gems, the sacred information was saved, taken back to Tizca, and stored within the great glorious white marble pyramid libraries. The city of light and enlightenment, a legacy for humanity to inherit, as Magnus and the Thousand Sons would one day finish the Great Crusade. Decades into the war across the stars, Magnus and the Thousand Sons expedition received a call for aid, hailed by the 4th Legion, the Iron Warriors. The world of Morningstar, a lost human colony brought into Imperial compliance only recently, was breaking apart, collapsing in upon itself. The evacuation of the civilian population, a feat of such titanic proportions, that even with the brilliant mind of the Lord of the Fourth, the Primarch Perturabo, still not all the people could be saved. Inside,
I mean, yeah, what could you really do in that event, right? If the planet is literally collapsing in upon itself, like, there's only so much you can do in a certain amount of time. I mean, unless you got technology where you could, like, stop time locally or whatever in, like, a certain radius and, like, pause the planet from doing that and then get everyone out and then, like, set it back to normal. I don't know. That would be kind of crazy, though.
the command room once again, Magnus and Perturabo met, both elated to be in the company of a brother once again. The architect and the scholar, one vermilion red, the image of vibrancy, life, and wisdom. The other immutable iron, strong and brutal. It was like participating in a living mythologized moment, a privilege to witness two demigods conversing, both of their sons in awe, that two Primarchs stood before them. Imagine what these two would achieve together. The Lord of Iron questioned his brother, asking why he had diverted resources to scouring the world for knowledge, with the task of evacuation still at hand. Magnus told his brother that he had read the records of this world, and locked within this planet was a truth as to why Morningstar had survived Old Night unscathed, that scarring age of horror that all of mankind knew. Think of the good that could be achieved with that information. Besides, Magnus told his brother, when had he ever been wrong about such things? A sentiment the Lord of Prospero utterly believed, even if he did acknowledge the hubris and pride of it. But something more had brought Magnus to his brother, the Antikythera, a replica of a tool designed to navigate the great ocean, the warp. Elation filled Magnus, himself brimming with excitement and potential for what he could do, what he could achieve with it. But his joy was snatched away as the Lord of Iron smashed it into pieces. Shock gripped Magnus, and then the briefest spark of hate. Why? How dare he destroy it? How could he deny his opportunity to gain knowledge? The only good is knowledge, and the only evil is ignorance. And this act felt nothing but evil to him. Our
Definitely sounds like a very Zinch statement. The only good is knowledge, and the only evil is ignorance.
Father knows more than us, Perturabo told him. He has seen further than us. If he tells us there are reasons of the warp, into which even he does not dare look, then we are beholden to accept that. Magnus had been forbidden, warned of delving too far into dark places in the warp. He knew of this, but yet it still felt evil. Ignorance, the sin. Knowledge wasn't evil. He believed in his heart he was strong enough to handle its power, but he dared not say that to his brother. Releasing his anger from his body, Magnus moved on from his
Hubris, the pride of that. You know, I mean, again, if the Emperor can't do it, or doesn't want to do it, that should give you caution.
brother's cruelty. The world of Morningstar required his attention, but the sting of resentment wouldn't fade. The evacuation outside began to escalate. Millions of people were ferried in overloaded ships as their home consumed itself. With the very world cracking, the Iron Warriors and Thousand Suns were spread thin, risking their lives to bring their people into the last bastions of safety.
I wonder what started that too, because it's not like planets, I mean, as far as I know, planets don't just like start collapsing in amongst themselves. I mean, I guess potentially, right? Like something could have happened to the core of the planet, could have, you know, destabilized and started that, but you would think that would be some kind of outside influence that would have done that. You would have think there would have been signs, you know, if it was a natural thing, there would have been signs over time, and they would have already like been evacuating the planet. It would have been like, hey, you know, in X amount of time, this planet's gonna collapse upon itself. We should probably GTFO.
News roared across the planet, people begging for aid. A call answered personally from Magnus as he personally rode out to help them. Landing down upon the surface, accompanied by his sons, Magnus found a city in ruins, the very earth beneath them upturning and breaking, lava, ash and smoke everywhere. Magnus psychically shielded his sons, the wash of sorrow and heartbreak of the people hitting him like a wave. He absorbed it all as tears rolled down his cheek from his one eye. Despite his power, knowledge and strength, he was human, and it broke him to see, to feel intimately people suffer like this. Magnus and his sons rushed forward. Save them, he ordered. Psychic power welled up from within as they all spread out, all of them breathing forth the arts of Prospero and rescuing the civilians. Magnus found the planetary governor wounded and on the verge of death. He utilized his abilities to save him, but soon found himself in danger. A shell from a tank burst into the Primarch's chest. Magnus felt true pain for the first time in his life. Not a careful experimental wound or sparring cut. True pain. It shocked him. It humbled him, sending a psychic pulse to all his sons. Hail, Shaitan! Screamed raw from the throats of an army of zealots. Traitors. A doomsday cult who had burst out around the planet, slaughtering the innocent civilians indiscriminately. All.
Well, I think that's the explanation there, right? That cult probably started this whole situation with the planet collapsing.
In the name of their prophesied great dying. Magnus burned and split them apart, buying time for his accelerated healing to seal his first true wound. He looked to the sky in horror as an Imperial ship, the Lex Ferram, began to fall, sabotaged by these vile cultists, doomed to crush the last city, ending the lives of millions of people. He would not let this happen. Roaring across the sky, in a damaged Thunderhawk, the Lord of Prospero gathered a cabal of his sons to the city. The sky above, steel and fire, their deaths almost certain. Magnus and the 1,000 Sons gathered together as the Primarch of the 15th unleashed everything he had. Light burst from him, as if a man had become a supernova, and all of Magnus's psychic energy released from him. The Lord of Iron and millions of Imperials stood in shock, bearing witness to a miracle as the burning, falling ruin of the Lex Ferram came to a halt. Magnus just saved millions, but at the cost of 24 of his sons, consumed and turned to dust in their armor. The guilt stung him, with not an ounce of strength left, his skin grey. Magnus collapsed, only to be caught by a brother, the Lord of Iron, carrying his very brave brother. Recovering from his wounds, the Lord of Iron praised Magnus. All of them had borne witness to what psychic powers could do. They saw what Magnus believed. He came a heartbeat from death. The Great Crusade would have been robbed of one of his brightest sons. More importantly, I would have lost a dear brother. There are none among our kin I regard as highly as you, so promise me you won't risk your life like that again. The kind words of Perturabo. Morningstar had almost killed him twice, but Magnus had not given up. Something hidden upon this world, this Shaitan, bore the truth behind this cult and the breaking of the planet. He would uncover it.
I mean, that's a pretty Giga Chad move, man, you know? Being able to essentially stop an Imperial flagship, it sounds like, from crashing into the city and saving millions of people. I mean, it sucks that, you know, 24 of his Astartes paid the price for that. But when it comes down to that kind of scale, it's a numbers game. 24 Astartes for millions of people. And you're there to save people. Like, I think those Astartes would have gladly given their lives to do so because that's what they were there to do.
Once again, Magnus made his way towards the surface of this breaking world.
And I feel like he also, at this point, right, is so dedicated to finding out whatever the secret is to justify those losses now. I feel like in his mind, it's probably one of those situations where it's like, I have to find this so that their deaths have meaning.
Now a legend, with a deed that was spread across the Imperium, a heroic act of a Crimson King.
Council of Nike, yeah, okay. Council of Nike.
If this is my fate, then I regret nothing. Better to have bathed in the light than cower in darkness. Better to have flown too close to the sun than never feel its heat.
Okay,
Magnus lay upon a cold steel table, his thoughts drifting, memories of his father flooding in. contemplating on his choices, how his insatiable need for knowledge, for answers, now put him on the verge of death. Finding buried deep within the cracking earth of Morningstar, Magnus, Azek Ahriman, Fosis Kar, and a detachment of his 1,000 sons opened the Ceramite doors to an ancient Terran colonization ship, the secret the world had been hiding. Immediately, Magnus felt an aura of dread. Nausea swept over him as they delved deeper. Voices began to speak in their heads. Ahriman begged his lord to leave, but Magnus refused. They had to know. A figure stepped out amongst the shadows of this strange, streamlined place. A legionary, silhouetted in a sick, rippling undersea glow. A possessed 1,000 son, screaming, "No one leaves Shaitan." A creature, a psychic apparition flew at Magnus, throttling him and slamming him into a crude surgical table, separating him from his sons. It poured its horrifying truths into his mind. Shaitan, an entity formed from the cruelty of humanity in the age of strife. The psychic echo of the tortured souls of this colony ship.
Interesting.
Thousands of innocent people who had been murdered and stripped of their connection to the primordial creator by their own people, millennia before. They had been afraid of that power in this age of darkness and rampant warp catastrophe. Magnus wept. He felt their suffering beyond anything he thought possible. The horror. They had taken something beautiful from them and killed it. And it was that suffering, those wounded minds that had screamed in rage and vengeance in his face, coalescing into this entity Shaitan. And it would make him feel that pain too. It would take away what Magnus valued most, more than anything, his connection to the warp. If this is my fate, then I regret nothing. Better to have bathed in the light than cower in darkness. Better to have flown too close to the sun than never feel its heat. Was it curiosity or entitlement that had brought him here? He had needed to know, always, even if it cost him his own life, because ignorance was worse. Magnus looked deeper into Shaitan, speaking to a consciousness that was beyond his. "Old Knight," he whispered, "the evolution of humanity, the emergence of more psychers, had been too sudden, unguided. Insanity and bloodshed had rippled across humanity in the stars, millennia ago. That was why the colonists of Morningstar had done this. They had tortured and broken all these people to save themselves. And when you love something with every fragment of your soul, you will sacrifice anything to save it. A people saving their world, like a father would save his sons." Ahriman burst into the chamber, attacking the creature and giving Magnus an opening to bind the creature into his grimoire. A tug of war that drew upon every ounce of Magnus's power, leaving him exhausted. The Crimson King returned to the side of his brother. They looked down upon the world that was breaking, the mystery unearthed, the culprit Shaitan, using the colony ship that was its tomb to break the crust of the world like an egg. One last vengeance of the tortured minds.
So, yeah, the original people that came to this colony were sacrificing psychers to protect themselves because of the warp turbulence that was going on at the time when the long night happened, etc. So, and this is like the psychic remnant of all of those who'd been sacrificed into kind of like one consciousness, taking its revenge on the people of the planet by destroying it now.
Magnus took one last look at the ships carrying the refugees, the millions of people, and then he ordered its destruction. The doomsday cult of Shaitan, that poison, could not be allowed to be free amongst the Imperium. How many more worlds would die if even one of them lived? Perturabo questioned his brother, commenting on this unusual cruelty, but this was not cruel. It was necessary. The ships and the people of Morningstar burned. All became dust. Scientia protestas est. Knowledge is power. What Magnus had known burned an entire world. Knowledge was also responsibility for those brave enough to wield it. Though the scars remained, Magnus and the Thousand Suns continued upon the Great Crusade, traversing the stars and bringing more worlds into Imperial compliance, and collecting more knowledge that filled the pyramids of Tizca. But his way of war was not appreciated by all, especially many of his brothers. Leman Russ of the Space Wolves was often a critical voice of Magnus and his legion's conduct. Even his vile brother such as Conrad Kurz cared nothing for the Crimson King's worldview. Many times, Magnus had risked open war to defend libraries, even in the midst of conquest, even from his brothers. After nearly 2 centuries of war.
I mean, yeah, it definitely sounds like his thirst for knowledge and want to save knowledge has put him in a lot of and his brothers, you know, and their legions in situations that could cost them greatly just to save knowledge, essentially. Putting value of knowledge over the lives of others is starting to backfire on him.
The Imperium spanning across enormous swaths of the galaxy, with billions upon billions of people, all united under one banner, Magnus, and the 15th descended to the surface of the world, coined Agru. Mountains and arid deserts dominated the planet, the temperature searing, even for the superhuman genetics of the Astartes. But something was wrong on the seemingly insignificant planet. The tides of the war, the primordial creator that flowed across the galaxy, howled furiously upon this place. It made the 15th Legion feel wrong. It assaulted them in their mind and body, forcing them into the higher levels of the enumerations, psychic mental paths created by Magnus, each level an escalation in mental solitude and concentration. Ahriman, Aemon, Phocis Dakar, Hathor Mat, Uthizar, and Sobek were all unnerved. Their lord, their Crimson King, had descended into the local human tribe's sacred valley alone. Somehow the people of this world had survived, free of mutation or rampant untamed psychic potential, even here in this place of violent tides.
That's interesting, right? The warp is extremely strong there, yet somehow the native humans living there seem to not be affected or mutated in certain ways, which obviously would be very useful knowledge for Magnus and the issues that are going on with his legion's mutations. So I'm sure that would definitely spark his want to learn what's going on here.
Knowledge Magnus had to discover.
Yeah.
The secrets here had taken them to the top of Agru's highest peak. But before the journey could begin, Magnus and his sons were interrupted. Descending from the sky, a contingent of space wolves unceremonially strode up to the Crimson King, demanding he answer the call of Leman Russ that had so far been ignored. Their arrogance and the sheer audacity to speak to their lord in such a way rippled anger across the Thousand Suns. But the wolves were quickly cowed with a simple burst of Magnus's power, earning a sign of submission. A compromise was reached, and the Thousand Suns and Space Wolves ascended the mountain together. Then Russ's call would be answered. The journey was long, scorching hot, for all except the wolves of Fenris. Still draped in furs and cloaks, they seemed almost unaffected by the heat. to the astonishment of the Thousand Sons. Magnus encouraged his sons, such as Ahriman, to converse and bond with their fellow Astartes, such as Othir Weirdmake of the Space Wolves. The animosity of the two legions, legendary across the Great Crusade, but Magnus believed that it was hate born from ignorance. Even they could be shown enlightenment. Magnus and his sons approached the precipice of the mountain, but they found themselves ambushed. The ground quaked, the air vibrated, everything was on edge, as the adrenaline of battle coursed through Magnus and all the Astartes. Ancient Xenos constructs, once thought dormant, burst from the mountain, and the battle begun. Everything the Thousand Sons launched at the constructs was repelled. Their frustration grew, all of them unable to unleash their full psychic potential due to the unsteady warp tides and the judgmental eyes of the Space Wolves.
So the wolves' battle prowess is probably what's going to save them here, like their martial abilities, being that the psychic abilities of the Thousand Sons have been hampered by the warp here.
Hundreds of Astartes fell in atomizing blasts, until Magnus, alone, with his feather cloak spread like eagle wings, began to swell with power. His limbs ran electric with light. Blue fire ushered forth from the glowing godlike Primarch, felling one of the Xenos constructs. No one attacked his sons, but the exertion of power cost Magnus dearly. He sank to the floor, his scarlet skin now pale, but it was not over. The wounded thing was not done, and launched a beam directly at the vulnerable Primarch. The Thousand Sons screamed. Ahriman and Uthazar crumbled to their knees. A legion overcome with soul-wrenching grief collected themselves and charged without restraint. With their throats raw from screaming vitriol and hate, they mopped up the rest of this Xenos filth. They turned to see amongst fire and smoke Phosys Takar on the edge of death. In front of him, a kind shield, and kneeling down behind him was their lord. Magnus lived. Better to have flown too close to the sun than never feel its heat. Again, Magnus had put himself in harm's way, all for the mystery atop Agru's mountain peak. The 15th felt a relief like nothing they had ever felt before, but yet again the wounded Magnus wanted to continue. At the summit, Magnus, the Thousand Sons survivors, and the wolves peered down into the crater. An aura of dread, so strong even Magnus wavered in its presence, oozed from a dark core. It was pure hate, a monster, sealed in a time and a war almost lost to the universe. The Thousand Sons approached, but dark tendrils rushed forth and swallowed their crimson king. In a dreamscape nightmare, a kaleidoscope of color and emotion, a disgusting serpent beast crawled forth, speaking to Magnus, torn.
Interesting, a serpent beast of the warp. You know, wonder this is starting to have some like biblical tie-ins here.
Him. It was nothing to Magnus. He had flown the great ocean even before his tutelage by his father. He saw through its lies. He saw the arcanic gate that it guarded and it bled from. More jabs came. It spoke of Magnus's pride, how it already sipped from a poisoned chalice. It knew his secrets, but Magnus spat back that he had bested powers greater than it before. He had delved into the depths of the warp. He was its master. Arrogance.
Are you?
The last word on the serpent's lips, as Magnus throttled the life from it. The darkness scattered, as the shining, blazing Magnus descended amongst his sons, who looked on in awe. Victory and knowledge of the gate was his, but the judging eyes of the wolves stared at the Crimson Lord. They, and many others in the Imperium, had also looked upon him in scorn, And after 2 centuries of war, after seeing the consequences of Magnus's
He might be able to.
choices, a question had formed in the Imperium. A question about the future of psychic powers.
There is an ancient legend of old Earth that speaks of 3 men of Aegina who lived in a cave deep in the mountains,
Said Magnus, with the warmth of a natural storyteller. Though he had heard this story before, Ahriman found himself captivated by Magnus's voice, the natural charisma that loaded every commanding word.
These men lived shut off from the light of the world, and they would have lived in permanent darkness but for a small fire that burned in a circle of stones at the heart of the cave. They ate lichen that grew on the walls and drank cold water from an underground stream. They lived, but what they had was not living. Day after day, they sat around the fire, staring into the flickering embers and dancing flames, believing that its light was all the light in the world. The shadows made shapes and patterns on the walls, and this delighted them greatly. In their own way, they were happy, moving from day to day without ever wondering what lay beyond their flickering circle of light.
Magnus paused in his recital, allowing the audience to imagine the scene and picture the dancing shadows on the cave's walls.
But one day, a mighty storm blew over the mountains. But so deep were the men that only the merest breath of it reached their cave. The fire danced in the wind, and the men laughed to see new patterns on the wall. The wind died, and they went back to contemplating the fire, much as they had always done. But one of the men got up and walked away from the fire, which surprised the other men greatly, and they bade him return to sit with them. This lone man shook his head, for he alone had a thirst to learn more of the wind. He followed it as it retreated from the cave, climbing steep cliffs, crossing chasms, and negotiating many perils, before he finally saw a faint haze of light ahead of him. He climbed out of the cave, emerging onto the side of the mountain, and looked up at the blazing sun. Its light blinded him, and he fell to his knees, overcome by its beauty and warmth. He feared he had burnt out his eyes, but in a little while his vision returned, and he hesitantly looked around him. He had come out of the cave high on the mountain's flank, and the world was spread out before him in all its glory. Glittering green seas and endless fields of golden corn. He wept to see such things, distraught that he had wasted so many years in darkness, oblivious to the glory of the world around him, a world that had been there all along, but which his limited vision had denied him.
The Primarch stopped, looking up to the stars, and his rapt audience followed his gaze, as though picturing the blazing sun of his story.
Can you imagine what it felt like?
Asked Magnus, his voice racked with emotion.
To have spent your entire life staring at a small fire and thinking it was the only light in the world, only to be then confronted by the sun. The man knew he had to tell his friends.
That would be quite the perspective change on life, thinking that they have this little fire in this cave is all that really exists, and then you exit and you actually see the world for what it is and the light of the sun. And yeah, I mean, yeah, just thinking then of all the time that you wasted not being out in the world.
Of this miraculous discovery. And he made the journey back to the cave where the other men sat, still staring into the fire and smiling vacuously at the shadows on the wall. The man who had seen the sun looked at the place he had called home and saw it for the prison it truly was. He told the others what he had seen, but they were not interested in far-fetched tales of a burning eye in the sky. All they wanted to do was live their lives as they had always lived them. They called him mad and laughed at him, continuing to stare at the fire as it was the only reality they knew.
Ahriman had first heard this story as a philosophus in the Corvée Temple, when Magnus had mentored him prior to facing Dominus Liminis. He heard the same note of bitterness in the Primarch's voice that he had heard then, a precisely modulated pitch that conveyed the proper measure of anguish and frustration at the blindness of the men in the cave.
How could anyone turn away from such light once they knew of its existence? The man could not understand his friend's reluctance to travel to the world above. But he resolved that he would not take their refusal to come with him as an end to the matter. He would show them the light, no matter what. And if they would not come to the light, then he would bring it to them. So, the man climbed back to the world of light and began to dig. He dug until he had widened the cave mouth. He dug for 100 years, and then 100 more, until he had dug away the top of the mountain. Then he dug downwards, a great pit in the heart of the mountain, until he broke through into the cave where his fellows sat around the fire.
Magnus fell silent, his words trailing off, though Ahriman knew it was a theatrical pause, rather than any real moment of introspection. Knowing how the story ended, Ahriman was not surprised Magnus had stopped here. In the original version of the tale, the man's friends were so terrified by what they were shown that they had killed the man and retreated deeper into the cave with their fire to live their lives in perpetual twilight. The tale was an allegorical parable on the futility of sharing fundamental truths with those too narrow perceptions of reality.
With those who are unprepared to change their perspectives in life. Some people are just happy in their little corner of the world and universe and their existence, and anything beyond that is too much. You know, sometimes that's just how people are, and that's just how life is.
By telling it select.
I mean, you know, it's throughout history, you know. Originally, the Earth was the center of the universe, and everything revolved around it. You know, the sun and all the planets and everything went around the Earth, and then that was the idea of anything different was, you know, essentially heresy for hundreds of years.
Magnus had broken his covenant with the audience, but none of them would ever know. Instead, he continued his tale with fresh words, woven from his imagination.
The men were amazed at what he showed them. The light they had been missing for all their lives, and the golden joy that could be theirs were they just brave enough to take his hand and follow him. One by one, they climbed from their dark cave and saw the truth of the world around them, all its wonders and all its beauty. They looked back at the dank, lightless cave they had called home, and were horrified by how limited their understanding of the world had been. They heaped praise upon the man who had shown them the way to the light, and they honored him greatly, for the world and all its bounty was theirs to explore forevermore.
Magnus let his new ending wash over the amphitheater, and no member of the Theatrica Imperialis had given so commanding a performance. A rolling wave of applause erupted from the tiers, and Magnus smiled, the perfect blend of modesty and gratitude. Sanguinius and Fulgrim were on their feet, though Mortarion and the Death Guard remained as stoic as ever. As pitch perfect as Magnus's delivery had been, Ahriman saw that not all of the audience were won over, though it was clear the case against Magnus and the Thousand Sons was no longer as cut and dried as his accusers had hoped. Magnus raised his hands to quell the applause, as though abashed to be so acclaimed.
The man knew he had to show his friends the truth of the world around them. And just as it was his duty to save his friends from their dull, sightless existence,
Take it easy, Howard. You have a good one, brother.
It is our duty to do the same for humanity. The 1,000 sons alone of all the legions have seen the light beyond the gates of the Empyrean. That light will free us from our shackles, of our mundane perceptions of reality, and allow the human race to stand as masters of the galaxy. Just as the men around the fire needed to be shown the glorious future that lay within their grasp, so too does humanity. The knowledge the 1,000 sons are gathering will allow everyone to know what we know, to see as we see. Humanity needs to be led upwards with small steps, with their eyes gradually opened, lest the light blind them. That is the ultimate goal of the 1,000 sons. Our future as a race is at stake.
See, the interesting thing about this is, like, he technically isn't wrong, right? Like, slowly introducing people to the benefit of the warp and the knowledge and things like that. I mean, yeah, you know, just like anything, you know, the warp and the abilities that psychers have could be a great help, you know, to humanity. The thing is like, he also doesn't really necessarily truly know the dangers. He knows some dangers, right? He's experienced being psychically attacked by different creatures and entities, but he's never really, like, truly faced, like, greater demons and various creatures like that in the warp, let alone what the Chaos Gods are, at least, you know, potentially maybe he has, as far as Tzeentch goes. You know, I like I said earlier in the video, I think him sacrificing his eye for the cure, he got that from Tzeentch, but without him knowing what Tzeentch, that it was Tzeentch. But maybe I'm misremembering or incorrect about that. It's very possible. But, and that again is where, you know, the Emperor comes in, because he truly knows. And I mean, that gets into a whole other discussion of, should the Emperor have actually, like, really let them know what the dangers of the warp were? Would they have been more cautious about it? I still feel like the whole idea was that the Emperor didn't want anyone to know about the dangers of the Chaos Gods, because any kind of belief or thought of the Chaos Gods empowers them more. And that's what the Great Crusade really was really him trying to go out and conquer much of the universe as quickly as possible, and, you know, impose the secular ideas of the Imperium to try to abolish any kind of essentially religion and belief in higher powers, to diminish the powers of chaos. And then that would allow him potentially to deal with the Chaos Gods in other ways, you know? So I don't know. But I mean, it's a compelling argument of, yeah, you know, take baby steps. Let's get used to the idea of the warp and what psychers can offer humanity progressively over time. Slowly learn how to use things, how to defend yourselves, and, you know, think of what, you know, humanity could be and become with these tools.
My friends, I urge you not to throw away this chance for enlightenment, for we are at a tipping point in the history of the Imperium. Think of the future, and how this moment will be judged in the millennia to come.